Okay, let's go back to the moon. I mentioned earlier on there's a possibility that this was towed into position 50,000 years ago, I understand, but we'll have a look at some of the evidence to show that. You're all familiar probably with the Learjet and John Lear. You've heard of John Lear. We were very friendly with John back in 99, 2001, 2002. One of his jobs, Jim knew him quite well. One of his jobs was to fly his father sort of invented, if you like, the Learjet, and CIA used quite a few of these jets quite regular. And John was a pilot, so he used to pilot these CIA guys everywhere. And he was told on one of the missions that the moon was totally in position, and that's where his interest in UFOs and although he had an interest prior to that, but he really got down to it and wanted to find out more. So he was told that 50,000 years ago, is what he told us anyway, they told him he was totally in the position, and they were involved with people, the remnants of the people from those days. They were involved in talks back in 96 and onwards. This is the sort of jet he was flying at the time. They've improved now, there's a lot of new ones. The idea was, and from what our work, that the idea of the towing the moon in position was that originally, long before about 50,000 years, we were on planet Mars. This is the story that was told. And we had, because of an incoming asteroid, the planet they assumed was going to be moved out of orbit. So the nearest planet to move to was Terra, planet Earth, and so steps were involved to bring us forward, and that meant bringing in another stability rock, if you like, and they brought in the moon. And that was the idea behind that. It's a very complicated story, but I've got a lot of information on it. If you ever, I can email you some if you like. So just a little bit about John there, so you give it a bit of a background. He flew a lot of secret missions for CIA, Central Southeast Asia and South America between 66 and 83. He had 17 world records, including speed around the world in the Learjet, set in 66. And he presented with this award for outstanding airmanship in 68 and the Simmons Wave Memorial. And he was the youngest. Another thing on his list was the youngest American climber the Matterhorn in Switzerland. It's something I always wanted to do. And in 1970s owned the skipper of the America's Cup boat. So he's quite a checkered history and quite a varied character, really. So that was his information from the CIA and the NSA. So looking at it, that's going back much further now, and look why we think this may have been the case. Velikovsky, a famous writer, I think the 40s and 50s, talked about the moon, apart from many other things. He got his information from various Platonic sources, dated 500 BC, and he wrote in one of his chapters in the book about this. Aristotle wrote that in a place in Greece before inhabited by Hellenes, so we're talking 1000, 1200 BC, had a population of these people called Lasagians, and they were Aborigines who occupied this land. Before that, there was a moon, and that was recorded in their ancient texts. They were living when there was a moon in the sky above the earth. I think that was around about 10,000 years ago. There's another famous person, Greek, Paulinus, who wrote. He mentioned at the time when not all the orbs were yet in the heavens. He's a bit of an amateur astronomer. And then we have recorded information from these various races, the Deucalion and the Denai, and the Arcadians. They said they dwelt on mountains and fed on acorns before there was a moon. So there's quite a variety of information, and once you start digging into it. Ovid, the famous poet, mentions the Arcadians said to possess their land before the birth of Jove, and the folk is older than the moon. It's written in translated from Latin. So you know, in the Old Testament, in Job, the grandeur of the Lord who makes peace in the heights is praised, and the time is mentioned before there was a moon and it did not shine. There's a number of instances in the Old Testament where that was mentioned. There's also in Psalm, thou wast feared since the time of the sun and before the time of the moon, a generation of generations. So we're talking, I think, for what I gathered from our work from some years ago, although I've been out of it a few years, we're talking about 50,000 years ago when this was told in. The Indians of the Highlands and Eastern Colombia, they also, in their ancient texts, relate of tribals' times before there was a moon. And the earliest times when the moon was not yet in heaven, which they record in their ancient forefathers. Interesting. And then we come to the more modern. You've probably heard of Dr. Wolf and Dr. Boylan. They're all. Dr. Boylan is a very keen UFO follower. I've lost touch with him for a few years now. Dr. Wolf was a NASA advisor. He died, I think, of cancer about 7 years ago. He mentioned an extraterrestrial space beacon they dumped at the monolith, which was retrieved from a US military spacecraft and brought back to Earth in 1972. I don't know if you knew about that, but Wolf declared that the moon is artificial, long ago positioned in its orbit by extraterrestrials, and furthermore he confirmed to Dr. Wolf that there is an extraterrestrial base on the moon, and when Wolf suggested it was on the dark side, he did not challenge that assumption. The monolith is quite interesting because it said that apparently, according to Dr. Wolf, there were 7 scientists working on it, and one of them was Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan was very quiet about it. Incidentally, all 7 scientists died of cancer working on this monolith. It was so radiated they had to work underwater eventually. But of course, in those days, they weren't too. Health and safety wasn't that brilliant like today. But Carl never really mentioned too much. He made a few snippets to it, but I think he was trying to get his cosmos theories into being, and he kept that very quiet. The information we got was from Dr. Wolf. So another interesting confirmation, if you like, independent information. And this is not the monolith, but this is one of the radar telescopic images from one of the spacecraft from overlooking the moon from about early 90s, I think. We put it in one of our books, and this was seen probably several hundred meters up, from what I gather, but no one knows what it is. No one has actually looked into it. It's just a terrestrial image of the moon taken from one of the NASA spacecraft. We did write to them, ask them, but obviously didn't. But NASA, they used to call it, is never a straight answer, so you never get anything anyway off them.